All right. Amazing. I see participants coming in. Welcome, welcome everyone. Um, I see a trickle of people joining the call. So I just want to call out that we're going to chit chat here for a couple of minutes. We like to give about 4 minutes for stragglers. So if you want to grab a cup of coffee, water, whatever it is, and come back, we'll probably start formally at about 2:05 here. But nice to see you, Supriya and Swati. We were just talking before we hopped over a little bit about the AI space. And I was mentioning that we're getting a lot of questions actually about like valuation, like it's valuation and like the salaries that we're seeing. And it's like a really dynamic question, right? Like I'm like, well, AI is kind of redefining a lot of these roles. Um, and so the market pricing on it, I think, is really interesting because I do see some roles really soaring and like going crazy with their comps. But then some of these roles that people are expecting to be hired really haven't moved much. I'm not sure if there's any anecdotes you guys have noticed while we wait for the rest of the people to join the call.
I think it's such a shifting market right now that it's hard to pinpoint and say which role will actually demand the higher comp in 2 to 3 years from now.
Hmm.
Having said that, you still have to hire today, so it's very fluid. And if you look at data from multiple sources, the data also varies a lot. So there's a little bit of judgment here. There's a little bit of candidate-driven decision making as to, maybe you have the candidate who is that top of the line, or are you okay with getting somebody at the 60th, 70th percentile of the pool? So I think our jobs are going to get more interesting for sure.
Hmm. Oh, and we have people. I messaged in the chat, which I love seeing people being active on as ready or already, that if you're comfortable, we'd love to know where you're dialing in from. It's also a good little icebreaker. The chat is your place throughout this call to message questions, topics, comment with each other. We love seeing activity. So love seeing the variety here. I think it's basically everywhere. I've seen Canada, the East Coast, West Coast, major cities, Florida, North Carolina, Missouri, London, I see in here, which is amazing. And got Hawaii. So we have a real spread of folks, and I got to look at some of the titles and people who are participating today. We saw some of your questions. So I think it's going to be a great crowd of like-minded HR compensation. I saw there's also some ops, some finance, even some like engineering leadership that wanted to have this discussion. It just speaks to how critical AI, I think, is in changing the landscape of every single industry right now. Um, so we're going to kick off just as a reminder for everyone who joined a little bit later. We're going to give it another minute, and then we'll go ahead and dive into the formal part. But while I have a small audience here, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So just as a reminder, this is an hour-long call. The way that we're going to run this is I'll switch over to introductions here in a minute, and then we're going to spend the first 40 to 45 minutes talking through the topics of AI and how it's impacting the space of compensation with Supriya and Swati here. At the end of that discussion time, we will have time for open Q&A. If you would like to submit a question for Q&A, you can see at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, there is a Q&A little button. It should be a quote box with a question mark. If you submit your question there, it will get put into a queue. We'll be notified. Our team will make sure that we see it at the end, and we'll do our best to get through all the questions in that QA queue. You also can put it in the chat if you want to, but it's usually best to be able to put it into that QA so that we're sure to see it. We also have a list of questions that were submitted by registrants as they came in. So we'll also try our best to get through those as well. We did try to summarize some of them into the discussion today, so they may already be answered if you submitted them. The last thing I'll call out is that we will be recording this and we will be sharing it out to everyone who registered after the call. It'll come via an email to your inbox. So if you do have to hop off early, while we'll be sad to miss you, don't worry, this will be shared and you'll be able to complete the rest of the talk at your leisure. With that in mind, I'm very excited to kick this off. And just as a brief introduction, I am Kaitlyn, CEO and co-founder of Pequity. We are the compensation management software for modern compensation teams. We manage everything from total reward statements to compensation cycles to ranges and market data. You can check us out at pequity.com. And we host a ton of these talks because one, my background is compensation. I got to work at some really cool companies like Google, Cruise Automation, and Instacart. And through my career and then running Pequity, I got to meet amazing HR and compensation leaders such as Supriya and Swati. So as this AI topic has come up, we've been having a couple discussions on the way it's changing the landscape, and we just wanted to have this conversation or fireside. And so without further ado, I'm going to actually introduce Swati and Supriya formally with their titles, and then I want to pass it over to both of you to introduce yourself a bit. But Swati is the Director of Compensation Programs, Operations, and Systems at Roblox. And Supriya is the VP of People Operations and Total Rewards. So these two are at the forefront of all the innovation that a large-scale tech company like Roblox is doing when it comes to rewards and technology. And I couldn't imagine a better panel to have this discussion. So thank you both for joining us. I'm super excited. And to kick it off, I'll give it to Supriya to go first to introduce herself.
Thank you, Kaitlyn, for having us over and for the lovely introduction. All I'm going to say about myself is I've spent my whole life in compensation and benefits. And more recently, I've taken on people operations. So I'm seeing the linkage between why is it important that all our systems flow very smoothly and connect with each other so seamlessly. So have more appreciation for all of that. But other than that, I just want to say for any of you who is early career, keep in mind, we all start there. I started as a comp analyst. And through the journey, I experienced a lot of different dimensions of compensation.
Amazing. Thank you, Supriya. And Swati?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Swati. I lead the compensation programs team here. I've been in compensation space for about 10 plus years, and very excited to, work here at Roblox. I also have a 7-year-old boy who loves playing Roblox, and, I am the most popular mom in the block. Of course, you know the reasons why. So very, very excited to be here and share, more about this exciting topic.
Thank you. And with that in mind, we're going to dive right in to not waste any more. And the first question that I want to present to you both is being in the compensation and HR space, what are the practical use cases for AI? How are comp teams or can comp teams leverage this new technology to make their work better, smarter, faster, or what have you seen?
I can start and then pass it to Supriya. So I think uh, as I was thinking about this topic, Kaitlyn, I really thought that we should think about, what is artificial intelligence and kind of set the stage for that before we go into specific details.
Love that.
So, artificial intelligence has been there for a few decades now. And in 1956 is when the Dartmouth Summer Research Project on Artificial Intelligence started, which is widely considered the founding event of artificial intelligence. John McCarthy is considered as the father of artificial intelligence. And what this essentially means is it's a study where, an attempt to find out how to make machines learn, reason, and act in ways that typically require human intelligence. What artificial intelligence does is it uses algorithms, data, and computational power to simulate human intelligence. And it can learn from these experiences and adjust to new inputs. And there are many examples of AI in our day-to-day lives, which, a lot of us on this call probably use. It's self-driving cars, the NLPs that we use, or even the robot vacuum cleaners, that I use at my place. I think those are all examples of artificial intelligence. But as I think about applying this concept in our day-to-day world in the compensation space, the first example that I can think of is, in the space of analytics and specifically compensation analytics. Now with the AI-powered analytics, we can analyze and visualize our compensation data in matter of seconds. And I think what's going to be even, what's going to further this even is when we have a chatbot that can power that analytics and answer questions live, with a business leader. It can generate real-time graphs and insights on the fly. So I think that's very interesting use case for, in our space. One thing that I do want to call out is, as organizations start thinking and considering about, building that on, the flywheel analytics and, in that space, organizations really need to spend the time to ensure that the starting place of the data analysis is clean. As comp analysts, that was one of the biggest challenges I ran into, which is like, it took me probably, hours to do the analysis itself, but cleaning up the data took a lot longer time. So I think organizations really need to pause and think about how do they build that data governance and data architecture that the bots can then build on top of that. So I think that's one use case that I think about. So Priya, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Swati. So I'm going to kick it off by saying, first and foremost, that artificial intelligence is the topic of every meeting, every conference lately. And it's going to continue because this train has left the station, and now we have to jump on it as we are able to. What does this mean for us? Does it mean that all of us have to start coding and building AI models? The answer is no. We all cannot be building AI models and code. But what it means is we have to have familiarity with how this relates to our space. And that's exactly what Kaitlyn's question is. What is the use case for AI in compensation? I'm going to add one more point before I go to the use case. Machines have always been with us, whether it was a calculator, which was also the primitive AI, where a machine could compute with accuracy and speed. Whether it was Siri or Alexa, who started answering basic questions for you, or what I did a few years ago, which even before the term AI was out there, is predictive analytics. Hey, given our current attrition and given our current hiring rate, what do we predict for the next few years? So machines have been along with us in this journey, but they have been machines. I think now the time is coming when the machines will become so intelligent that they will now be a team of augmented capability for humans. And they could be considered more like partners in your team. Okay, so now getting into the use case. So this kind of sets our context for how AI is moving and how these machines are going to become part of our team, or like team members or thought partners. So another use case, in addition to analytics, that we see is the machine doing the work that the comp analyst does today. Now, I don't want to scare anybody on the call. Yes, what will the comp analyst do tomorrow? Well, we think we have a lot of work that the comp analyst can do tomorrow, and it will reshape the role of a comp analyst so that all the computational, the data cleanup, the computational work, the initial analysis is all done by the machine. And then the analyst is really focusing on understanding those insights and being a strong partner with the business. For most groups that have compensation business partners, you spend 60% of your time in analyzing the data and about 30 to 40% of your time in spending with the business. How about we flip that? That the data analysis becomes, table stakes, and all you're doing is understanding how this is going to impact the business, how is this going to impact hiring for the future. Because not just comp team skills are going to change, skills are going to change across the spectrum. So how is compensation going to even support the needs of the business as the business says, hey, I used to look for a software engineer like this, but now I'm going to look for a different type of software engineer. So what should I pay them? So there are plenty of use cases both within comp and how comp supports the business. So we've got to start on this journey, because the sooner we start, the sooner we'll realize that things are moving at an exceptionally fast pace. And no matter how fast you're moving, you will get the feeling of being left behind, but that's okay. The important piece is that we continue making step-by-step progress to be able to support ourselves with AI as a comp team, And how is it going to change how we price jobs and how we support the business as all of their jobs become AI based?
Love it. And there's a lot of meat into what you're describing. And particularly, coming from a product standpoint. So having done comp, but more sitting on the side that like services the technology now. We think about this a ton where it's like, how can we leverage in with our comp teams? And we ask people like on this call and you, Supriya and Swati, like, what would you want? And the first place we did find an easy answer was analytics. And to your point, we launched this year our premium analytics, which is you can real-time query, talk to it. It'll visualize graphs. You can say, show me my engineering pay over the past 12 months by level, and it'll create a pretty chart for you. And I saw that and I was like, wow, this is magic. And we launched it this month, and I'm already like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna be behind. Like we have to look at agents, we have to like advance because the AI technology is changing the landscape so rapidly. And it kind of goes into a couple of the questions I see. Well, for some of these, we'll probably put them to the end because I think they'll probably tie in better. But there were a couple questions around specific tooling that you all have seen, if there is any. I'll do a casual plug for Pequity because we have that, but if there's any other tooling that they should know of. And you mentioned, Supriya, about not having to learn how to code AI, but there's a couple questions on, well, should we learn languages to like Python to be a programmer, knowing that this is coming in. Just curious about the tooling or the skill set piece that people are asking about right now.
So I'll cover the skill set, Swati, if you want to cover the tooling. So skill set, yes, I think somebody told me a while ago, when I had moved to California, they said you should need to know Spanish if you live in California. And I said, yes, I realize that every day. As you talk to more and more people in the tech industry, Python has become a second English language. Okay. So to answer your question directly, I do think there is some level of upskilling that we need to do. It's not that, we're just going to stay with spreadsheets anymore. So our team has done last half, our team did SQL training. Now they're doing Python training. The reason they're doing this is, as I mentioned earlier, is maybe some of them are really good at it and they go on to building your internal bots because there's still a fear of how much data do you want to share, outside. And we very strictly say, please do not share data with unauthorized AI tools. If we have a contract with them, then it makes a lot of sense. So I would say we're starting off with SQL, Python, and then looking at LLMs, where we could, the easier prompt engineering skills, where we could do a lot of the lengthy analysis that used to take weeks and sometimes months in hours to days. So that's definitely a skill set. That's where we are today. I don't know what it will look like 6 months from now because the pace at which there are new tools coming in the market, yesterday I came across an article that said, here are some replacements for Excel. And I was like, okay, let's dive into this and see. So the only thing I would close this out by saying is be open to talking to new companies, vendors. I know we often are so heads down in our work that we are like, no, I don't have time for all this, but be open to that because every company who is providing software as a service is looking at providing AI as a service now.
Oh, 1,000%.
So engage with your, industry vendors, engage with consultants, engage in forums where you will learn, and then you can make a decision what is the right tool for you because it's going to be different tools for different companies.
Yeah. Plus one to what Supriya said, I think, given we are in the compensation space and we have data that's very confidential, tied to the employee, we really have to be mindful of like only working with companies where we have signed a contract with before we share that data set with them. Here at Roblox, we use Gemini. And, I have seen it, some of the data sets that starting off with the emails and like just kind of refining that is something I've seen that applied in my day-to-day, and that's helpful. But having said that, I'll make a plug for Pequity because I know when I first saw, the proration formula that, Pequity actually was able to write using the tool that Kaitlyn has built, I think that was phenomenal. Outside of that, there are other tools in the market. Complete has, a version of it in the artificial intelligence space. We have Bolt and Replit, other companies out there that also do a lot of different things, but you have to use it with caution because you must have an active contract with them before you share the data set.
Love that. And just to go back, there's a couple questions that touch on some of the things that you all were mentioning. And so first, Supriya, you mentioned that there was an analysis that took weeks and months, and then it brought it down to days. Some on the call just wanted to know if you could, without providing anything too sensitive, give an example of what that was.
Sure. So for executive comp, we do an analysis called realizable pay analysis. And for those of you who have worked in executive comp, it looks at every RSU vest, every option on the day of vest. What was the price, grant price on the day of vest? What was the strike price? Then you calculate the difference in gain. And imagine if you're doing this for 20 people, you're starting a month or 6 weeks in advance because every number is so manually driven. And you have to have 3 or 4 people who check it because you cannot send the board incorrect version of realizable pay analysis. So that is just one area where scripting can really help. And we don't even have the Python skills yet, but just SQL scripting can really help. And Swati, I know your team also during Hack Week did more work on how we used our SQL scripts to come up with the results.
Yes, I can cover that. So, in December, we had our Hack Week, and today we build our compensation cycle model in Google Sheet, and it usually takes us about 2 to 3 weeks to around that time frame to kind of really test out and make sure everything's on point. But during Hack Week, our team actually learned SQL in the last half, and we used that skill set to really apply it and build the comp cycle model. And, my team shared that, it took them maybe about 2 days to kind of
Oh
build
my
it from start
gosh.
to finish, right? So I think we really learned a skill, and then we were thinking of like, how do we apply it? And we said, what other ways to use it than apply it to the comp cycle model? And that really shrunk the time from, start to finish. And I think that was a great use case for it.
And
And
I just
was,
want to plug in that the reason we're talking about comp cycle model is because we are a fully formulaic comp system. So 99.5% of our outcomes have to factor for every use case, every edge case.
oh man.
So that is why for us, our model is everything. And we build it in a spreadsheet because even though we run it in Workday and our Workday partners are building the code for it, but who would know better than comp team members
Oh,
that we want to have a 0 error track record, which we have done. And don't want to jinx it, but for many, many cycles, we've had a 0 error track record. And that's because we validate all the programmed outputs through our model to make sure that if there is any difference, either we didn't build the model right or the programmed output is incorrect.
and I'd love to know when you mentioned like the models, and I know this is something that we've talked about in our notes. Are you using AI to help with that validation or to help with the building? I know for our team, like for example, everyone knows Copilot, which helps you code. So are you using it to help with the SQL coding, or how is that being applied into it?
Yeah, so far we haven't used, we are writing the code, but yes, that would probably be the next application where, you don't necessarily have to learn SQL. If you know the basics, you can ask Copilot to kind of write the code for you.
Love it. And going to another part of this, we're talking about building compensation models, and compensation in general is sensitive data. And you mentioned not giving data to vendors without having vetted them, I'm sure, and then signing with them. One of the questions is, how do you balance the sensitive nature of compensation, especially individual information, when you're trying to automate?
I would say if I'm testing a vendor that I don't have a contract with, I would use dummy data. Okay. No real data. And if your intention is just to test, if I even want to get into an NDA with them, that's a good place to start. But more likely than not, if you're meeting vendors on a regular basis, they will share with you, like Kaitlyn talked about their, AI analytics. This week I met with another vendor. They talked about their, version of Copilot or AI partner or whatever they are going to call it. So the vendors will share with you and instill a level of confidence, and they are more than happy to give you demos. Once you reach a point of, this is the kind of AI tooling I need, then you can sign an NDA with them. You can actually be a design partner with them. Sometimes they're really happy if you want to be a design partner with them.
Yes.
And if none of the above apply, then you have an NDA. You can ask for a beta version that you can test out before you enter into a contract.
I'd also add, for anyone who's curious, obviously the way I talk with a lot of HR teams, I feel interesting where I used to be a buyer, getting the software, and now being the seller. I still have a bit of the buyer brain and a very HR buyer brain. And so I think something to look at with these tools is that there's twofold security, which is tech security, which is what we're talking about with like SOC 2 Type 2, GDPR. And the other layer is kind of HR level security, which is like who can access what, where is it going, how many people on the back end have access. And for tooling like Apequity, we do think about when we add AI, we try to treat the AI like an agent. So to Swati's point on like coding SQL, it's not like the tool will pull in your data to a database and suddenly all the Pequity customers has access to your data, right? Like that's not a good use case. It's not a safe use case. I don't want to be responsible for that. Instead, most of these tools will sit on top and act like an agent to your data, and they'll interact with your data through a separate thing. So like with our analytics, it's like an analytics agent that will query your data into a visual table on your instance, but it's not pulling your data into some LLM somewhere where it's like educating the LLM, because that to us is actually not worth, like, it's maybe down the line if those LLMs get better security themselves, maybe, but to us it's still even an unknown, and so we're entering it cautiously. And I encourage you to ask vendors about it, because I will always, like, I'll tell you here on this call with all of you here, because I think it's important. I think it's a differentiator. And I think a good vendor understands the sensitivity of HR data and the, compliance risks that are out there. And they should be able to answer those very forthcomingly. And those are big flags to look for. Um, but just putting that out there as well, because I know I didn't even know that this was a concept of having a AI agent sit in between your data. A lot of times, I think most practitioners, myself included, when we started on this, I assumed the data had to go into the LLM. It had to be taken into the education model, and that is not the case at all. And along those lines, we do have a couple of questions that I think tee back into some discussions that we want to go into, which is what are now, like, what agents or AI agents have you all seen, or what do you think will happen with AI agents to improve workflows around compensation? And I'm not talking necessarily just like the analytics, but things such as comp cycle planning, or we had talked about pay equity analysis and reporting. And I'm just curious, your thoughts on these more sensitive in nature work that the comp teams are performing.
Sure. I can kick it off, and then Swati can talk about comp cycle management. So as comp professionals, we know we do annual or sometimes semi-annual benchmarking. And I don't know about you, but throughout my life, that's one process I've not liked doing because it is super painful. The survey companies will change all their codes. They will add new jobs, remove existing jobs, and then you start with a whole job matching process just to validate if your job matches are still, the right matches. Then you pull data from multiple sources. I'm sure most of you pull data from your recruiting database also, from your attrition database also. And of course, everything comes in a different shape and size. And then you pull all this data, then you scrub the data. It doesn't end there. And you remove all, what are your outliers? You remove those, or data that you feel is not, robust. You remove those, because I used to get this question a lot. What is the robustness of the market data that you have? And I'd created a mini scale as to what is highly robust, what is not robust, and what comes in between. A scale of 1 to 5 I had created. So you do all this and then you say, okay, now what will my ranges be? But then before you build your ranges, you have budgets to factor in. So you need to say, okay, I want to do these ranges. This is the order in which I want to reward these job families or these job profiles for, high to low based on the company's focus areas. And then you come up with ranges, and even then you're going to have people say, I don't trust the data you have, and I don't agree with these ranges, and people, all of that happens. So this is just deja vu for all of us who've lived through, for me, 25 years of benchmarking.
Scar tissue, scar
So for
tissue.
me, the biggest AI agent I'm looking for, and if there is a company that has it mastered, is a continuous benchmarking AI agent. Because first and foremost, benchmarking should not be done once or twice a year. Secondly, if I'm getting data feeds, whether it's monthly, whether it's quarterly, I'm willing to live with a certain cadence, but not semi-annually or yearly. If I'm getting regular data feeds and I have an agent that can say, hey, these are 5 new jobs in XYZ survey. We think these should be the job matches. Please validate. If you check yes, I will take these job matches. If it's no, tell me what job matches you want. So that's first point of intervention that the AI agent can do. The second thing is it pulls the data from the various sources and comes back and reports back, let's say not in days or months, but in hours, that here is what I want you to focus on. And these are the 50 jobs that market has moved drastically, plus or minus, whatever variance factor you put in. And then I tell them, hey, I want to prioritize my budget based on these 10 jobs, not 50 jobs, because sure enough, maybe the facilities market data has moved, but I don't have a problem there. So I'm not going to put in more money there. I'm going to put in money in these 10 jobs. And then it'll come back and spit out a set of ranges for you, saying that if these are the ranges, this is going to be your cost to bring people to ranges. I want an interactive AI agent that can do all of it. Are we doing something about it? Yes, we are doing pieces of it internally, because I'm not going to wait till somebody gets this to me, but I know the speed at which a company is going to invest in this is faster than the speed at which I'm going to be able to invest time, because I have so much business as usual work, whereas their work is to make sure they're providing this AI as a service. So that's my story on continuous benchmarking, and I'll give it to Swati for comp cycle management.
Yes, for other folks on the call who lead comps, who are in the midst of compensation cycle, I'm living and breathing this. So I think my hope would be if there is a AI agent that can run the compensation cycle from start to finish, and then of course leave the pieces where the business has question or like higher tier 2, tier 3 strategic level work that needs to be done for us to engage with the business there. So I think, right from the start is like, we give the AI agent a set of principles and a set of eligibility criteria to even start thinking about which set of employees are actually eligible for the cycle. So we start there. And whether you have a discretionary compensation program or a formulaic compensation program, I think AI agents can look at the entire data set and can recommend what the increased percentage should be for your employees. And that way, that can be like some sort of a guiding factor for managers as they think about how much increase should folks get. And as the AI agents are doing this, they need to start thinking about like, how do we bring the budget into play? So all of those different pieces that we as compensation professionals think about, I think those are pieces that we can train the AI agents on and provide all this information. So they start thinking about it the same way as humans do. Now, having said that, I will say, I don't think so we'll be at a point where, the agent is running everything end to end. There'll definitely be human intervention required and needed. And I think that's the place we really would love our function to evolve to.
Love that. And there's a lot that you kind of brought up with this like automation, Supriya and Swati, that ties back, I think, if we were to make it more meta, around the use case of AI, and it's kind of around these repetitive tasks. And I know we got to speak a little bit about it, but do you have any examples of other repetitive tasks? Because, when I think of even benchmarking, it is repetitive, but it's also a little judgmenty, right? Like you have to probably read the job description, figure out that percentage match over to the job list. There's different job lists by survey. So figuring out, okay, like what's the weighting for, to your point, Supriya, to the scale of a good survey. So those things they're meaty and there's a lot of repetition in them. But do you have any other examples of repetitive tasks that you think would be useful for people to know?
Yeah, some vendors may not like me saying this, but I think pay equity should also not be a once a year or twice a year analysis. It should be built into your hiring process. It should be built into your, whether you do annual or biannual compensation reviews, it should be built into that. It should be built into off-cycle comp adjustments. And the sooner you get to understand if this decision is going to create a pay inequity, the better you are at making those decisions. What happens with pay equity, and I'm going to say it with a little bit of pride, but humility also, that we have mastered not running we still run an annual pay equity analysis through a third-party vendor because we want to report the results in our proxy. But we know the results even before we go to the vendor because we have built pay equity at the DNA level of every program and every, at the time of offer, at the time of comp cycle, which is fully formulaic, at the time of off-cycle progressions. So because we've built it naturally in our comp design, we don't have to work towards it. But I think if you are working towards it, which 90% of the companies work towards it, please think of what agents can you put in place. And some of these companies will provide you those agents, but you have to be very disciplined about applying them for every comp decision.
I'd just like to add, there are two use cases that I would think about that any company should start their journey with. Is the first one is if you're part of compensation programs team and as you're running the cycle, one of the things is at the end of the cycle, we have to make all of these C-suite presentations, right? And today we do it in Tableau and a combination of Google Sheets. But I think that's a place where an AI agent could truly come in and really automate a lot of the insights, because that's where you can train models and ask questions. And that, I think, is a great use case. The other use case I think about is, in the role of a compensation business partner, you get asked a lot of these questions on a day-to-day basis. So maybe thinking about like creating some sort of a repository of all of these questions, creating a knowledge hub, and then training the model to respond to these questions on an ongoing basis, I think would be another useful use case.
That would be amazing, I'm sure, for all of us who've had to write those FAQs and they change every 6 months and you're like, oh no. So I feel that one acutely. And the other thing that I'll bring up, just a small plug, is something that we think about both as a vendor and someone who works closely with our teams. So for anyone who doesn't know, Pequity does comp cycles, but we have the software that you can self-service. Or a lot of our customers opt for a managed service experience, which we see as hopefully eventually being replaced by AI agents. Not that it'll scare our team, like our team will always have a spot. But when we look at a lot of the activities that we do, and this came up a couple times on the call, the data cleaning, like even just having some AI that can go through and say, hey, like you have this architecture that you said is your ranges, or that you have listed somewhere in your HRIS, but then your people are coming over and it's not matching, and helping make some judgment to do the initial match, to be like, we fixed it this way, audit it, or hey, like, we see that this person's outside of their range, like they're in a range, but it looks like they're at like the, 130th, whatever part of the range that we have. That kind of activity, I think, is a huge time save, and we think about it a ton. And I think there's already tools. I heard you say Bolt.new Swati, which has, if anyone's curious to look up, they have this crazy build story. They went for a long time as a startup, and then they added this AI builder, and it took off in 2 months or something. They hit this crazy ARR revenue. But tools like that can help. I think it's the concepts that are all in these AI platforms, but it will be eventually getting a provider to take that concept, I think, and like rein it into, for us, compensation, but specific fields. That would be the most helpful. But I think that's another area that you could build. I'm sure it sounds like if you guys have such great pay equity outcomes, you do a lot of work on your data cleanup because we know how important that is. But it's another area that I'll call out of you for anyone on the call. You could build it yourself. Pequity's working on our own version of a cleaner. I'm sure there's other tools out there as well. but I will harp on this forever because I think your data quality is, as we all know, so fundamental to the success of all your other programs. And that actually goes to another question that if you want to answer right now, Supriya, we can punt to the end, but there's a question about how you,
I have
um,
seen some questions on pay equity, and I'm
yeah, there's quite a
not
few.
making this a pay equity conversation, but I'm happy to take it offline with all of you, any of you who wants to reach out to me. So there were two questions that I saw on similarly situated groups and on what factors do you look at. So every company defines their similarly situated groups. Ours is at a very granular level where we each, so think of it as an IC2, and I'm using IC2 as an example. We don't use the traditional IC structure, but each IC level has 3 sub-levels. So overall, if you look at the full master of levels that we have 36 levels. But if you fit it into the broader category, we still have 10 IC1 through VP as 10 levels, okay? Now, within an IC2, you may have IC2.1, IC2.2, and IC2.3. And each of those have a compensation point attached to it. We don't have ranges, we have points. Okay, so if you are an IC2.1, then every IC2.1, whether you're coming from IC1.1 or whether you're coming from IC1.3 into IC2.1, you will get the exact same amount. So to answer the question on similarly situated groups, it is very granular. It is by job family, job profile, and within that job profile by level and sub-level. And then what factors we look at, the only thing we normalize for is you could be an IC2.3 this time, but next cycle you got an IC2.2, so you regressed. So we look at the regression cases with, they normalize the data. What would it be if there was no regression? What is it with other regression cases? And we engage with the company, with a third-party vendor who will then, do the complete regression analysis for us, look at statistical significance in any area, and then finally give us the results, which we publish in our proxy each year. But so here's the difference. The difference is are you doing this for your CHRO to be able to say that we have pay parity, or are you doing it genuinely to have pay parity? We started with the other, that we absolutely want the confidence that we have pay parity because I sleep very well at night and I don't want this keeping me up. Having that pay parity has to be in your design and not as a eventual output. The output will naturally come if it is in your design. So I know somebody asked that, is this done just for the public image? Our employees will compare notes after the cycle and say, oh, interesting. I moved 2 levels up and you moved 1 level up, but we both are at the same comp because we don't have ranges. We don't have a merit matrix also. We have compensation points.
Super interesting. I'm sure that there could be its own talk in of itself. So we could probably follow up on that. But making sure we move forward as well with some of the other questions. Some of the questions that came in from registrants was around, as AI continues to evolve, what skills should comp teams be building to stay ahead? And I know we touched on it a little bit, the upskilling that Roblox has done, but would love to just double tap on that since it's probably very applicable to people here. What you mentioned SQL, you mentioned some Python, but I know Roblox has invested a ton of this. Do you want to talk more about the programs that you all have been rolling out?
Yes, I can start, and then Supriya, feel free to jump in. So I love this quote, and when I was reading this book to my son, this is a quote very close to my heart. It's the more that you read, the more places you go. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. Right, by Dr. Seuss, if any of you follow. And at Roblox, I think we believe that learning is a lifelong journey and continuous upskilling is a key to growth and success. So the idea which came in from our Chief People, Places, and Systems Officer, Arvind Casey, and he really inspired us, saying that, hey, you guys are really good at the technical skill sets. Why don't you all challenge yourself and the team to learn SQL? And, we took that challenge on last year and we said, yes, we'll invest our time and effort in learning SQL. And our team, learned SQL in the past half. So that's what we did last half. And then we used that skill set to really apply in our day-to-day life by building the comp cycle model. This half, our team is really invested in learning Python. And we are making slow but steady progress. I think, with learning both of these skill set, our eventual goal is we are able to apply this in our day-to-day. Of course, the AI agents are there and we can write these Python codes over there as well. But I think knowing that at a fundamental level is a skill that's always going to remain with you. So we are encouraging our team members, and many of them are there on this call today. So thank you for taking up the challenge and learning. And we'll continue we'll continue on the learning journey here. But are we there 100% today? No, we are not. It's going to be a journey, and we'll take smaller steps towards upskilling ourselves here at Roblox. Supriya, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to make sure people walk away from this webinar is, first and foremost, we don't have to fear that will we have a job. Some level of fear is good, but not to the extent that it hampers your growth. So the way I see our growth, it could be twofold. One is for roles in which AI will augment but not completely replace your tasks. Okay, for those roles, you should work on upskilling people. So because then they can better utilize the technology for their roles. And then there could be roles where we, just before this meeting, not related to comp, we were talking about some roles that could be eliminated over time. And at that point, we want to think about reskilling that talent at the company. Now, each company also has an AI strategy, and and I think it's only a matter of time that HR and compensation teams will be working very closely on the AI strategy if we are not already. And these strategies will require us to think differently on how we benchmark and how we pay people also. Because I just remember a time when, Excel and Word became mainstream. And this is a small story from my personal life where my dad, when he was doing his PhD, there used to be this secretary who would type out the thesis, and it used to be on a manual typewriter. And then they transitioned to an electronic typewriter where they could, backspace. And then they transitioned to doing it in Word. So suddenly the demand for somebody who could do it in Word grew for a short period till the time we realized this is mainstream for us and everybody should be learning this. Okay, so think of it this way. Today, the challenges that we are facing on AI compensation is for now, but AI and ML are going to become mainstream for us. So be very careful before you set high premiums, and you may want to gradually move in this direction and say, let's do a few custom offers. Let's look at those custom offers over a period of 6 months. Maybe the mark has shifted for some roles, but has it shifted for all software engineers? Has it shifted for all people who are using AI technology? Maybe not. So all I would say is identify where do you need upskilling, where do you need reskilling? And on your team, at least as a comp leader, it is your duty to understand how do I bring this team along as the AI journey continues.
I love that. And I think it's important to emphasize for all roles, like you mentioned, something I said at a couple conferences that some people are like, oh, I don't know. I think of AI, not even just like the typewriter, but almost like electricity, right? Or the internet. This like really fundamental shifting technology that's going to change the way most things operate. And I think that sounds scary. I think some of it we don't even know. Interestingly, I saw, and I talk about electricity because I saw a talk where they said the number one winners of the electricity change was refrigeration. And we don't think about how many of our foods we now have access to because we have electricity to keep it fresh. And we have restaurants and we have this whole industry and this whole part of our economy that sprang up around the fact that we could have food last longer. And we couldn't have predicted it. We wouldn't have known that these things would happen. But when electricity first came out, people feared it. They said, oh my gosh, it's going to kill you. We see here with AI, it's going to take over. Everyone's talking about the Matrix or, whatever film applies. And they also talk about, oh, it's going to come for the jobs. And I think to some degree it will, like, there are gonna be roles I don't think that may exist in the future. And that might sound a little scary, but it's not that the need for that work will go away. It just may be replaced. And instead of having, whatever we had pre-electricity, which was probably steam engines and all the requirements to support that, we will have electricians and we're going to have a refrigeration industry or whatever the equivalent is pop up. So I hope for a lot of people they look to that. Like as someone who's building a product, I'm like, what is the refrigeration equivalent with AI? Like, how do you tap into that market? Because that's probably the most lucrative, honestly, for someone building a product, but also I think where the most interesting innovation is going to occur. And it's just a framework, of course, but encourage if anyone does have questions or wants to know what we see happening with any of these skill sets. I'm sure you see it in the data sets, but we have some of our own market data and we're posting articles all the time. And I'm sure Supriya and Swati, they can get in touch with you to ask. Along those lines, though, just making sure, because I know we have about 5 minutes. We have a little bit of time for questions. If anyone does have a question that they want to put into the chat or into the Q&A, feel free to submit. Otherwise, I will just ask a couple of the ones that came in from registrants. But you have about 5 to 6 more minutes if you want to sneak in one more. Swati and Supriya, we did get a question about JDs, which I think is along the lines of benchmarking, a very frustrating part of our job. So I'm curious if you've seen any tools that helped with JD management, or if you've used AI at all to do that part of this work. Swati?
I can start. So I think at Roblox, we don't maintain job descriptions, internally within our, platform, but externally, yes, we post it when we have job openings. I think this is a really interesting question because, the HR teams in the industry is likely still responsible for maintaining job descriptions. I would love to think that this was a thing of the past, but unfortunately it's not. I think employers can leverage AI to streamline, improve, and standardize job descriptions because, there are many platforms out there. Unfortunately, I haven't used one. But we can incorporate more inclusive language and, it can also help you to translate into various languages as well. And AI can kind of expedite the process of adding relevant skills to your job listings while ensuring they are still kind of in alignment with your corporate values and legal requirements. Supriya, do you want to add anything else?
So actually, we do use a tool. I don't know the name. I can share it with Pequity later. On the recruiting side, we do use a tool that does this kind of a scan because I haven't hired, my directs have been here for a while, so I haven't hired for a while. But when I was looking for one of my directors, they had put it through this AI tool, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and they said, well, the tool feels this, the tool feels that, this is more geared towards men, this is more geared towards women. And I was like, seriously? And they gave me some suggestions and I dismissed those suggestions. I said, if the person cannot do this, I cannot work with this person. So this has to stay on the job. So of course, I'm talking about 3 years ago. So the tools were not as sophisticated. But there are tools that our recruiting teams use to do such scans. And then, there will be, because as a comp team, we don't manage job descriptions. So I really don't get into that. Now, our people team does do an FLSA audit on different jobs. So they look at job descriptions and they are working with legal on, scanning these job descriptions and understanding what passes the FLSA test and what doesn't. So there could be a number of answers to this. I'm afraid that because we are not directly involved, we don't have a very specific answer to this. I do see one question that somebody asked as to what do you do when you're a small comp team? And that's so true for most comp teams. My only advice to people is whether you're a small or a big comp team, invest in learning. Even if it is 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, invest in learning. Because as they say, when a child is growing, even reading 30 minutes a day or 60 minutes a day, eventually your vocabulary increases so much over 10 years. I think the same thing applies for learning. Have learning as a core curriculum for your own growth and development. And you could learn from different channels. It doesn't have to be through a platform. You could learn by speaking with other vendors. You could learn by going into peer groups. You could learn by reading articles. there's so much data out there that you can't even keep up with how much is out there. So learning has to be a priority for every team member, if it's a 2-person team or if it's a 3-person team, and share your learnings.
Love that. I'm not sure if there's a direct answer, but do you have any recommended AI training providers, or have you used any providers to train your team on AI?
That's a great question. I don't have, so we started with SQL and Python, as you know, and our leader is very tech savvy, and he'll keep showing us new tools and how he built apps with those tools. And now it's getting to a point where, as a company, we are identifying the prescribed AI tools and vendors. So in the next few months, we will have the list of prescribed tools and vendors. Because we deal with such sensitive data, we are not going and just testing our data in different tools. Once we have that tools, which will be in the next few months, we can do a post that these are some of the tools that we are going to be using, and you can take it from there. Will all tools be supporting comp? No, this is going to be more broad, that what are the tools that the company wants to use, and then you got to see if any of them applies to comp. If it doesn't, then you have wonderful partners like Pequity, Compa, Pave, multiple other partners who are providing this kind of AI as a service.
I love that. And we're about 4 minutes to the end, so this is where we'll do a little wrap up. Swati, Supriya, thank you both so much for joining us today. We had such a good conversation, such an active chat. And I'd love to just let you have a couple moments to sign off. Any closing thoughts or comments for the group?
So I think I'm going to repeat myself here by saying you don't need to know it all. You just need to have the learning mindset. And we are all in this journey together. Seriously, there aren't a lot of people who know 10x more than you in your space. So that's the good news. The bad news is things move very fast. So you have to make an intentional choice to learn and to upskill your teams. Upskilling the team is very important.
I'll probably add a little bit on the same vein as well. I think is comp leaders, analysts, compensation scientists, whoever you are out there, I think you really have to embrace the unknown and step out of your comfort zone and embrace learning, because that's the only way you'll be able to keep pace with everything that's happening in the industry.
I love that. And just echoing everything you all say, this is an exciting time. If people have questions, I know for sure, obviously reach out to me. I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. I love geeking out on all the compensation. But Supriya, Swati, what's a great way for people to get in touch with you? LinkedIn, okay?
LinkedIn is great. Yes, and I get a lot of LinkedIn requests, and then I sync up with them one-on-one on a Zoom call or something. So feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn.
Amazing. And we'll share your LinkedIn profiles after the call in case anyone wants to scope you out. Thank you, everyone. Just as a reminder, this recording will be shared with you within the next hour. After it loads, it'll be sent to your email. It'll also be uploaded probably in the next month to our company page, so you'll be able to see previous recordings and this one. If there are questions or follow-ups, you can find us at pequity.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but AI is top of mind for all of us. So if we can connect more, or if you have more topics you'd like us to discuss in the future, if you want us to bring Supriya and Swati back and talk pay equity, let us know, give us feedback. It always helps us make these calls more valuable for you all. With that, thank you, Supriya. Thank you, Swati. This was delightful, and I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.